Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming here today. For those who do not know me, my name is Nikola Jovanovic. I'm the spokesperson of the President of the General Assembly. On our right side is Chief of Staff, Mr. Zdravko Ponoš, and we are joined here, of course, today by the President, His Excellency Mr. Vuk Jeremic. The President will make some opening remarks, and then we will be happy to take your questions. Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, to this press conference. It's been an exciting time behind us in the General Assembly. A lot of things are on the plate of the General Assembly. In the past few weeks and months, there have been some important developments. I'd like to share with you some of my views and thoughts on those developments, and also to share with you the schedule and my views and thoughts on the upcoming developments coming up in the General Assembly. We had a historic ATT session of the General Assembly where a resolution was adopted, a very significant one. I'd say that this is one of the significant breakthroughs in the United Nations system related to the trade of arms, international trade of arms. There was also a lot of work going on right now within the system of the United Nations and in General Assembly in particular regarding the post-2015 development agenda. There is an open working group of the General Assembly on Sustainable Development Goals. I also attended a last session of the Secretary General's high-level panel on post-2015 agenda in Bali. We will organize a briefing, I believe, next week on how this Bali session went. And we're also going to organize a special session of the General Assembly when the President of Indonesia is going to present this report in May, the report that will be handed over to the Secretary General. But there's going to be a special plenary session in which this paper is going to be presented to the membership of the United Nations. And there are a number of other work streams currently going on in the context of sustainable development. I have appointed facilitators for various work streams. I have appointed ambassadors of Norway and Kazakhstan to help the General Assembly structure a group of 30 experts that will be tasked with devising strategies for financing sustainable development. There is also a group of facilitators, two co-facilitators, that is Brazil and Italy, that I tasked to help us create a high-level political forum that is going to replace the Commission on Sustainable Development. That body is going to be tasked with monitoring and observing the fulfilling of the Sustainable Development Goals once they are hopefully crafted by the Open Working Group and adopted in the General Assembly. There is also very notable work by the ambassadors of Ireland and South Africa that I have appointed to help us prepare a landmark high-level event on Millennium Development Goals on September 25 of this year. This is going to be the last big conference on Millennium Development Goals, which will hopefully pave the way to conversion from Millennium to Sustainable Development Goals, for the passage from Millennium Development Goals to sustainability. So these are all different work streams that relate to the same topic, and this is the sustainable development, the post-2015 development agenda, which in my opinion ought to be converged into a single whole. So there's going to be a lot of work to put all these work streams together. I'll spend a lot of my time and energy working together with all these facilitators, putting them together, creating maybe an informal panel of all the people who are official co-facilitators for those work streams, so that the way is paved for the General Assembly in the next 1,000 days to come to a single, holistic, and comprehensive sustainable development agenda. That is, in my opinion, possibly the most important piece of work for the General Assembly for the next 1,000 days. We've started with the thematic debates in the General Assembly. It is a prerogative of the President of the General Assembly to select topics for thematic debates in any given session. That is according to the resolution from 2006 of the General Assembly that gave birth, if you will, to the concept of thematic debates and tasks the General Assembly President for selecting the topics. We have 3 of those behind us. There was one on March 22 on water. It was a very big and successful one. There was a concurrent event in The Hague whilst we were holding this thematic debate. I believe it was a very big event in this year, which is the Year of Water. It's an international UN Year of Water. A number of interesting discussions on this important topic that relates to sustainability that we've had behind us. There was one last week on international criminal justice, and it was the first time ever that this important topic was discussed in the plenary thematic format. So in a way, this is a landmark discussion. It also proved to be the largest thematic event in the history of thematic events in terms of the number of participating countries. 82 countries signed up to speak. 49 of the speakers spoke on behalf of 82 countries. Some speakers spoke on behalf of a number of others. But 82 member states signing up for this event made it the largest one in history of thematic debates. 20 years after the creating of the first ad hoc international criminal tribunals, and about 10 years after coming into the effect of the statute of the ICC, I believe it was an appropriate time to reflect on the past of the international criminal justice, to try and examine if there are any lessons that one can learn from the works of the ad hoc criminal tribunals, and also look at the best practices as well as possible mistakes that may have been made by those institutions with one important thing in mind, and that is to make sure that the future of international criminal justice is a more perfect than it was its past. I refer, of course, to the ICC, which is going to be the remaining standing permanent court to try international crimes against humanity. Some people were obviously uncomfortable with this debate. Some people were uncomfortable with a topic being brought up in an open plenary, but my opinion is that there should be no taboo subjects, no forbidden subjects in the General Assembly. And although international criminal justice is indeed a very delicate topic, where else one can discuss international criminal justice other than in the chief deliberative policy making organ of the United Nations, a principal organ of the United Nations, one of the principal organs, that is the General Assembly, in which all countries are equal to each other. In other words, where you have a sovereign equality as an underlying concept. There were attempts at boycott of this event, but they manifestly failed. I said that this ended up being the thematic debate with the largest number of participants in history of thematic debates. I believe that there were certain points of view that this was somehow controversial or biased, the way it was structured, but I presume that there will be questions related to that, so I'm not going to spend too much time at this stage in my opening remarks. I'm going to leave you guys to ask questions if you still think that there was a controversial element to this, or if there were any biased elements to it. Yesterday, we had another important debate, I'd say a landmark debate, and that was on the role of the United Nations in global economic governance, with a particular focus on possible relation between the UN General Assembly and the G20. I think it's a topic of paramount importance, given the current economic situation in the world, given the challenges that the world is facing right now, and given the prominence and significance of the G20 economies. I personally believe that those decisions that are from time to time made within the G20 format invariably affect political, social, and economic development of every member state of the United Nations. And therefore, I believe that every member state should have a way of having their voice heard in the discourse on the global economic governance and global economic issues in general. And again, the General Assembly might provide a platform for this exchange of views and thoughts. A number of those issues are discussed in the Bretton Woods institutions, of course, but in those institutions, you don't have sovereign equality of all the member states in the way you have it in the General Assembly. So one of my proposals was to try and regularize interaction between the G20 and the General Assembly, and I even proposed some specific ways in which we can do that. A number of speakers presented their views. We had some very high-level speakers. President of the European Commission, Mr. Barroso, spoke. We had Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago speaking, several ministers, also a Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy of Turkey. Another G20 country spoke there. We had a briefing by the Sherpa of the current presidency of the G20, Russian presidency. They presented their plans and ideas for the G20 presidency of the Russian Federation, with a chance of membership to ask questions about their agenda. And then in the afternoon, we had an exceptionally interesting, in my opinion, a panel of experts, some of the former leaders and academicians, and also Sherpa of the UN, the Secretary General Special Representative in the meetings of the G20. We're still writing up all the comments, all the interventions, and they are going to be available soon and put up on the web. Another big thematic debate that is coming up this month is another first, and that is going to be a thematic debate on a peaceful resolution of conflicts in Africa. This is going to be a first African thematic debate. It is coinciding with the 50th anniversary of the African Union, and a number of high-level speakers, I expect heads of states and heads of governments and ministers, various ministers from various African countries, and also some non-African countries, to attend this conference. I very much hope that a declaration is going to come out of this thematic debate in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Organization of African Unity, that is a precursor to the African Union that we have today. May is going to be reserved for a big debate on climate change. Climate change, green energy, and water sustainability. This is the first time, again, that a thematic debate is called on an issue of climate change. I strongly believe that the issue of climate change should be discussed in the General Assembly. Of course, there is a special framework for climate change negotiations, climate negotiations, that is COP. But I believe that the world diplomats are going to benefit from a debate being held in the General Assembly on this important topic. There are not too many of us who are in the General Assembly who are very well acquainted with the topic. And just like the economic debate, which is principally held elsewhere, and I'm referring to Bretton Woods institutions, and this topic is principally held elsewhere within the COP. But I think that both of those issues, both economy and climate, are geopolitical enough in their nature so that I believe it is worth debating them at least in an informal format that is the thematic debate, to be brought to New York, to this house. There's going to be in June one on culture. The principal partner for this thematic debate is UNESCO. We're working closely with the UNESCO on organizing the debate on culture and its relation to sustainable development, another important topic. And in July, we're going to have a one on social inequality. And the principal partner for this social inequality thematic debate is going to be the Organization of American States. So a particular focus is going to be on Latin America, but not limited to Latin America when we come to discuss that. And finally, also in July, there is going to be a special event. We haven't branded it a thematic debate, but it is going to be a pretty wide and interesting on education and its role, the role of the education goal in the future sustainable development agenda, with a special reflection on how well it was fulfilled as a Millennium Development Goal. We're working very closely with former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Gordon Brown. He is our principal partner. His NGO is his principal partner for this event and education. So in front of us, we have Africa, climate change, culture, social inequality, and education. These are the main topics for the rest of the year in terms of discussing issues related to international relations, which I believe are of special importance for the system of the United Nations and all the member states. So there may be other things coming up. You never know in this very turbulent world as to what can be put in front of you. There are a number of hotspots right now, as we all know, and if there is a need for the General Assembly to deal with any of those issues, we are, of course, going to be prepared together with the member states to address them adequately within our Assembly. I'd like to stop here. I'd like to give you a chance to ask questions. I guess there may be a number of questions related to at least some of those topics that I mentioned.
Thanks, Mr. President. Good to have you back in this auditorium. It's been a little while. On behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to be with us. You covered my first question I was going to ask about the economic thematic debate. So I'll ask another related to the thematic debates issue. That, as you brought up, there was some disagreement on the value of last week's thematic debate on international criminal justice. There were, as you said, some boycotts. The United States, among others, stayed away. There were criticisms of the date that it was chosen for. I mean, don't you feel that some of this dissension reflected badly, or are you glad that these kinds of things were aired openly? And then a second question has to do with July. There's the annual remembrance of the massacre of Srebrenica, and I wondered if you'd be participating in those events. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I guess I don't have to answer the one on the economic, because it was on the economic thematic debate. The one I covered it in the beginning. So, okay. So I would now like to spend some time discussing the obvious, still a hot topic, the last week's debate on international criminal justice. First of all, I'm going to repeat that I believe it's a topic of immense importance for the international community. If international criminal justice, with everything that it means and with all the important aspects of it, if that's not an important topic, then I cannot think of too many important topics to be debated in the United Nations. So I stand by my firm initial belief that this is a topic worth debating in the General Assembly. Now, there were accusations of a bias in the way that this thematic debate was structured, and I'd like to address this. Number one, I have decided to, basically with all the thematic debates, I've decided to split them into a state part, in other words, the member states part, and expert panels on the topic. Now, when it comes to the states part, it is very, very difficult, in my opinion, to argue that you can find a way of structuring it in a biased way, because every single member state is invited to speak. 193 member states are invited to speak, and I said from the very beginning that nobody is going to be denied the right to speak, and nobody is going to have a time limit for how long he or she would want to speak. So I don't think that this part was in any possible way biased. When it comes to the panels, the expert panels, there were accusations, and some of them were very direct, very strongly worded accusations, including in this room, about the biasness of the way it was structured. So I will start by reading out a list of the people who were invited, officially invited to this thematic debate. I also have prepared the written correspondence between Office of the President of the General Assembly and each of those individuals. I would propose that if you want to be interested in any of this, that you send an email to us and copy the person who you are referring to. And then if that person agrees, I would share this with you. I have no problem of sharing it with you, but since it is not only my correspondence, it also belongs to the people who I'm just going to read, the names of the people who I'm going to read. If you ask for this in an email that has both of us, and if that person agrees, I'd be more than happy to share this with you. Sang Yun Song, the president of the ICC, was invited to participate in this thematic debate. Theodore Meron, the president of the ICTY, was invited as well. Then Vang Jönsson, the president of the ICTR, that is the court for Rwanda, was invited to participate. Fausto Pokar, the former ICTY president and the current judge of the Rwandan court, was invited. Kenneth Roth, the director of the Human Rights Watch, was invited. Then Anto Nobilo, the attorney of a number of Croatian indictees, including generals, he was defending them in the ICTY. Then Tina Intelman, the president of the Assembly of the State Parties to the ICC, she was invited as well. Carla Del Ponte, the former prosecutor of the ICTY, was invited. David Tolbert, president of a prominent NGO that is called International Center for Transitional Justice, he was invited as well. Patricia O'Brien, the USG for Legal Affairs, she was invited as well. And Adama Dieng, the UNSG's special advisor for the prevention of genocide. So these 11 people were invited to participate in the debate. Now, some of them have confirmed their participation. For example, the ICC president, Kenneth Roth, Anto Nobilo, Tina Intelman, they confirmed in writing their participation. And a little later, they also wrote to cancel, to withdraw their acceptance to participate. A number of them said that they couldn't participate after a couple of weeks of thinking about this invitation. I am going to share with you that list, and I'm going also to share with you the list of the dates when they were invited, when they accepted, when they wrote to withdraw their acceptance in such cases. Patricia O'Brien and Adama Dieng, these are the only two for which we don't have written correspondence because we had telephone conversations in meetings with those two. With Patricia O'Brien, we had a telephone conversation. She said on 20th of March that it is absolutely impossible for her to participate on April 10 debate. That she has more pressing issues to attend to. She wouldn't specify what would those be, but I personally can think of a few more pressing issues than debating international criminal justice in the UN General Assembly for the USG of Legal Affairs. But of course, there was no way for me to force her to participate. Regrettably, she couldn't. When it comes to Adama Dieng, the UNSG Special Advisor for the Prevention of Genocide, I had a meeting with him in my office on March 21. I've asked him to participate. He unfortunately said that he was going for a one-month-long vacation and that there is no way for him to participate. I asked Mr. Dieng to then provide me with somebody who he recommends to participate instead of him, and Mr. Dieng unfortunately never got back to us with those recommendations. So we're talking about 11 people. 11 people who were invited to participate. How did it come about that they accepted, some of them, and then declined? How did it come about that all of them, in the end of the day, couldn't be with us, couldn't be with the member states on the 10th of April? Maybe an interesting topic. But I was accused of a bias. I mean, those people that I read, those 11 people that I read, are, in my opinion, of course, we never know what would they say if they were part of the debate. But if they came, I think that there's a reasonable expectation that they'd be pretty strongly supportive of international criminal justice. They chose not to be there. Was this somehow related? Maybe we're talking about too big a number for this to just put it down to chance, that we just said that they just couldn't make it. There were also some weird things. For example, Mr. Pokar, the former president of ICTY and the current ICTR judge, he wrote to us saying that unfortunately the president of the ICTR scheduled a plenary session of all the judges of the ICTR for that date, for the date of the 10th of April, and that therefore he can't make it and nobody else who is related to the ICTR can make it, because the president of the ICTR actually scheduled on that day a plenary session of all the judges of that court. So my personal opinion is that somebody obviously thought that I could be embarrassed by all these cancellations or intimidated by pressures so that I give up this topic, that I give up debating this topic in the General Assembly, given all those cancellations. Well, there are some people who don't react too well to pressures, and especially unprincipled pressures, and I'm afraid that I'm one of those. So my initial thought was to have a very balanced set of panels with all these people that I have listed to you. Unfortunately, they were not there. So we're still writing up the afternoon part, what people said. I suspect that the overall result is going to be predominantly critical of the international criminal justice. But you can't hope to have a balanced debate if you somehow make sure that nobody participates who would be presenting one point of view. It wasn't my intention. I have documents here to prove that this wasn't my intention. Unfortunately, these ladies and gentlemen refused to come to this debate. So we worked with those who have accepted. Given that I wouldn't bulk under pressure, to cancel what I believe is a debate on a critically important topic for international relations. When it comes to states, permanent representative, His Royal Highness, Royal Highness the Prince of Jordan, the permanent representative of Jordan, he sat here and he boasted, as a matter of fact, that he worked with many countries asking them not to participate in this debate. Well, it obviously didn't work too well for him. He didn't get support in the Arab League. He didn't get support in the Organization of the Islamic Conference. I believe this was not a good way to try and pull down a topic, a debate in the General Assembly, but it was his choice. As I said, it didn't work out too well. I believe that democratic and a fully free exchange on any topic in the General Assembly should be sacrosanct. And I would accept no pressures to give up a free democratic exchange. We had a free debate in the morning because every single country was invited to speak. 82 of them from various geographies, various backgrounds accepted the invitation and they spoke. In the afternoon, we had more criticism than what we would have had, I'm sure, if we didn't have all these cancellations, but then it was the choice of the people who decided to cancel and those who obviously worked with them to make them cancel. Because you will see from the dates, because I'm listing the dates in my paper, that it is somehow in a very short time period, all of those cancellations or withdrawals. But I'm leaving you to judge. Now, you have asked me also a question about Srebrenica, and of course, a lot of attention was devoted to a press conference that was held here on the same day. Mothers of Srebrenica and a couple of others were present with permanent representatives of Liechtenstein and Jordan. So, first of all, I want to say that I am of the opinion that Srebrenica was a terrible atrocity. And for me, attendance to the events related to Srebrenica wouldn't be a first. I actually attended the 10th anniversary of Srebrenica in the year 2005. I was personally there in Srebrenica representing Serbia together with my then president, Boris Tadic. So my attending of this wouldn't be a first one for me. And I was also later on Minister of Foreign Affairs in the government of Serbia that pushed in the Serbian parliament a resolution on Srebrenica that contained an apology for what had happened in Srebrenica. As a matter of fact, I am going also to distribute to you for your information the text of the resolution passed in the Serbian parliament on Srebrenica, apology resolution that we passed. I'd like to underline one fact. European history is full of tragedies and full of occurrences that, in my opinion, require some kind of contrition. However, the Parliament of Serbia was the first parliament in history of Europe that extended an official apology for an atrocity taking place in the European continent. So I was part of this government, of this majority that pushed this resolution. My party voted for it. This resolution was passed. This was our official policy, for which I'm not ashamed of. I am standing for this. But speaking about Srebrenica, I would like to address some of the accusations that were leveled in that press conference. The lady that spoke on behalf of mothers of Srebrenica, she made some direct accusations, and I'd like to address some of them. First of all, she said that we were somehow obstructive and not helpful in facilitating their presence in the United Nations. Nothing could be farther from truth, and actually one of the papers that I will distribute, because this is an unofficial communication, is a written correspondence between the Office of the President of the General Assembly and Mothers of Srebrenica from the moment when they first expressed interest in being in New York. By the way, at a very late date. At a date when it was obvious that the boycott failed and that the panels are going to ahead nonetheless. It was only then you're going to have all the dates and correspondence, and I'm going to distribute this to all of you, what we were writing to them and what they were writing to us. But in short, they were invited at the first show of interest. In their correspondence it said, we would like to speak, but if that is not possible, we would love just to be present. You will see from the correspondence. We wrote to them a courtesy letter saying, of course, you can be here as a guest of the President of the General Assembly. There was no other way in which they could be there because they're not an ECOSOC NGO. But of course, I had absolutely no problem, given the significance in the trauma that Srebrenica brought to Bosnia and to the Balkan relations in general. I felt I didn't think for a second that they ought to have an invitation. By the way, there were also some demands for the victim NGOs of Serbian ethnic group in Bosnia. They also wanted to come here. However, they couldn't get a visa and they couldn't be with us for this. Now, only 2 days before the actual event, Mothers of Srebrenica asked to speak in a very ultimate fashion. You are going to also see this from the correspondence, saying if we are refused the right to speak, we are going to consider it. If we are refused the right to speak, we're going to consider it what exactly? I'm going to say. If you refuse us the right to speak, we are going to consider that you are exercising discriminations towards victims of genocide and other crimes committed in 1999 to 1995. Now, I would like to draw your attention to one fact. The panels were expert panels on international criminal justice. This was not about victims. It was an expert panel on international criminal justice with deep respect and sorrow for their loss. They were not exactly, in my opinion, they're not exactly experts on international criminal justice, and the panels were supposed to be about international criminal justice and expertise in this regard. Now, we of course thought when we were structuring this event prior to deciding that it is going to be a legal panel, we were thinking of maybe having a panel related to victims. But the reason why we decided not to have victims is that, number one, the name of the thematic debate is such that it focuses on institutional justice, international criminal justice, and number two, you start inviting victims, there's so many groups of victims. In Yugoslavia alone, you're talking about Croats, Serbs, Albanians, Bosnians. If you give a right to one group of victims, it makes sense to give right to all. But I want to remind you that this was not about the International Tribunal for former Yugoslavia only. It was about all the international criminal tribunals. So you would then have to invite Rwandan victims, or victims from Sierra Leone, or victims from Cambodia. It would make up basically for 2 or 3 panels, only for victims. And we had, in our mind, expert panels. So I explained this very kindly in the correspondence to them, that given the structure of the panels, we cannot invite them to speak, but they will, of course, be very welcome to be present and sit with us in the hall of the General Assembly throughout the day. Unfortunately, there was an incident in which my understanding is that the rules of conduct, how you're supposed to behave in the General Assembly, were breached by somebody trying to put up posters that are, according to the rules, forbidden in the General Assembly. I must admit that I was totally unaware of what was going on in the room. It was happening in the back of the room. I heard later that the security of the United Nations acted according to the terms of engagement, and that they were asked to leave the room. It was told somehow that it was my personal security, that my wolves, this was the actual expression, that my wolves somehow kicked her out. I'm terribly sorry. I wasn't even aware of the fact that they were asked to leave. But they were asked to leave because they have breached the way people must behave in the General Assembly. So with all due respect, again, for their loss, and with the great sorrow for what they have gone through and what they must be still going through and what they will be going through until the rest of their lives, there are certain rules that must be respected here in the General Assembly. I haven't written those rules, and I am not in charge of exercising those rules. It is the security of the United Nations. She also made some very strong qualifications and some personal insults, I would say, that I'm somehow the continuer of Slobodan Milosevic. I find it personally very offensive. I have worked very hard at some point in my life, and as a matter of fact risked my life by being part of the underground resistance movement to the regime of Slobodan Milosevic. This is well known. And I found it very, very personally offensive, but I'm not going to continue addressing those issues anymore. If there are any follow-up questions, I'd be happy to answer. But just to wrap it up, it was an important topic. States were allowed to speak in an equal way, and there were panels. They were supposed to be fully balanced. One side decided to boycott, and then that side, quote unquote, you know what I mean, and then that side, having decided to boycott, started making complaints about the bias. I don't think that's a fair accusation. Please.
Mr. President, just as a follow-up to this, one of the allegations of bias was that the principal speaker was the president of Serbia, who is a known critic of the ICTY. And I wonder if you could address, for example, why the presidents of some of the other countries that were involved in big cases, for instance, from Africa, were not invited so that it would be a more balanced, high-level segment.
Well, thank you for asking this question. Every single country was invited in the same way. There was a single letter sent to each and every member state of the United Nations, all 193. 2 of them chose to respond positively by sending their heads of states. One was Bosnia and Herzegovina. The other was Serbia. They spoke in the order, in the alphabetical order. The Bosnian president spoke first, and then the Serbian president. These were the 2 heads of states. In the General Assembly, there's a rule that you first give the word to those with the most senior position within their governments, within their countries. So we had 2 heads of states. They were followed by the two ministers that chose to come at the ministerial level. Two countries chose to be there at the ministerial level. One was Rwanda, and the other one was Namibia. So a president of Serbia wasn't the keynote speaker. He was just one of the speakers in the 82 long, actually 49 long list, speaking on behalf of 82 countries. He was one of the speakers who happened to be highest in seniority and second in alphabetical order. There were no keynote speakers. It was just the opening by the President of the General Assembly, myself, and the Secretary General, and then we started into a general debate format discussion in which every country was given the right to speak as much as they chose to speak.
As a follow-up, one of the other criticisms was that General Mackenzie was added at the last minute.
General Mackenzie was indeed added at a late stage, and that followed the last round of cancellations. Unfortunately, we had in mind initially a slightly different composition that would be, as I said, centered on the list that I just read out. But following all those cancellations, we thought that we need to invite somebody else with a high likelihood of not canceling upon presumably pressured to do so, and that was General Mackenzie. By the way, there were some very strong accusations leveled on that day against General Mackenzie. I personally believe that they're unfounded. General Mackenzie has never been convicted of any of the accusations that were leveled at him by various groups and organizations, but he spoke, I believe, well for himself during that particular panel, so I have nothing else to say. But I just want to remind you, the general was the commander, the UN commander on the ground at a time when some of those atrocities that were later on addressed by the Hague Tribunal were processed first, and then I will.
How much were you aware ahead of time that this would mushroom into such a controversial event? And secondly, there was reaction here. Obviously, there was also reaction in Serbia. Can you tell us how you feel these two contrast, since you are Serbian, and some say you might even have some aspiration for future Serbian career? Obviously, you're not going to tell us what your future, or if you are, we'll be pleased to hear what your future plans are, whether you're going to be Secretary General of the UN or President of Serbia. So these questions, first of all, how much were you aware? Secondly,
well, I think that with that, first of all, it was called, this debate was called on sometimes in November. It was announced sometimes in November, and at that time we started working with all the member states, and actually one of the member states that confirmed participation in writing later on decided to boycott. There were two of them. Two countries spoke out publicly. This is my recollection. The two countries spoke out publicly that they are going to boycott. One of them confirmed in writing in a months before. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to say. But I'm not talking about the number of countries. I'm just talking about two of them. The
Canada or the US?
Or Jordan.
Oh, Jordan, right.
only two have spoken loudly that they're going to. Only two, to my recollection. Actually, I read in the papers that there were three. I only heard two. So when it has all become interesting, I'd say, is when all these cancellations started coming. And you are going to see when they're coming. The cancellations started coming in the 2 weeks in March. We're talking about the 2 weeks of March So basically, well, less than a month, or about a month, if you will, before the debate was going to go ahead. So that was the moment when it became to me, that it came to me that we might have a difficulty because those things were happening. We kept inviting people, we kept working with the people to make sure that they come. I'm now talking about, if you will, the pro-camp. But by then, by the time when the official cancellation started coming, there was a wall. You would just not be able to get any of the defenders, if you will, to participate. And then I had a choice. Well, I would have thought that there would be more courage to discuss it in open public and put forward one's point of view, even though there may be critics on the other side of the aisle, if you will. But obviously, a lot of people were not prepared to hear any kind of criticism on, if you will, the holy cow of international, one of the holy cows of international relations, that is international justice. I am not going to say my opinion on it because I'm in the position of the President of the General Assembly. I'm just going to repeat what I said already. I don't want to go any deeper into what is my view on those various courts. I was only quoted in public criticizing one of the courts, and I'm not shying away from criticizing this court again. We're talking about the ICTY. We are talking about a court that somehow leveled convictions for Serbs that accumulate to about 1,000 years in prison, plus 5 life sentences, which you can't really count in because they're life, they're not numbered. It also is a court that is winding up its work, having convicted nobody for a single crime committed on the territory of Croatia against Serbs. So the cumulative work of the Hague Tribunal for crimes committed against Serbs in Croatia is 0 days in prison. And that includes the Operation Storm. Operation Storm is an operation within this 1 week of the operation in the territory that was under the protection of the UN. A lot of people forget that this was also one of those territories under the protection of the UN in a similar way to Srebrenica, not identical, but in a similar way. 250,000 people were expelled from their homes. We're talking about a couple of thousand dead during this expulsion. We're talking about processing generals who were convicted in the first instance by the Hague court to big sentences in prison and then fully acquitted by the appeals chamber. Now, the end game, the end result of the work of the Hague Tribunal with respect to the crimes committed against Serbs in Croatia is 0 days in prison. Nobody is doubting that Operation Storm was a crime. Not even the court denies the fact that it was a crime. By the way, it was a crime that is celebrated in one of the member states as a national day. So nobody is denying that this is a crime, that this was a crime. Yet, nobody was found guilty for such a crime. I think that it's a logical question that follows after that. Is there anything to be debated about international justice in an open format so that we can better understand how could that come about? President of the ICTY, Mr. Meron, he was the only person who declined in this list, who actually didn't shy away from saying publicly that he doesn't want to participate. Others were, I would say, with more tact. The president of the ICTR called for a plenary session of all judges on that day. The president of the ICC wrote that due to some pressing commitments that came up at the last moment, he can't join. President Meron was the only one who said openly that he wouldn't come to a debate that is organized by a principal organ of the United Nations. And that's a UN court. I personally believe that it speaks volume about his conscience, but that's my personal opinion. I don't believe that international courts, especially mandated by the UN, should be in a position to say no to participating in a debate organized by a principal organ of the United Nations. Just like I believe that the USG, when invited to such a discussion, shouldn't be in a position to say I have something much more important, and I wouldn't specify what. And advisors in the SG office, like Mr. Dieng, the advisor for the topic that is very pertinent and relevant to international criminal justice, to say there's no way I can change my 1 month long vacation. But that's my personal opinion on the ICTY. I've said it in the past. I'm not going to shy away from it. But when it comes to the rest of the views related to ICTR, ICC, Sierra Leone, Cambodia, which were, by the way, all debated in those panels, I am going to only say, after compiling all the interventions in both state and panel part of the discussion, and after we made them publicly available on the website and in the hard copies.
In Serbia, can you tell
Sorry?
us? How did this
I don't know.
event play in Serbia?
I don't know.
You read the newspapers, you didn't speak
I
the
was on
language?
Monday in China with the president of China. I was on Wednesday here. I was on Friday in Istanbul at a big conference on mediation that had to do with the UN mediation initiative. And on Monday, I had a crazy day with a full day of discussion on the UN G20 relations. It's been a really difficult week. I haven't had a chance to follow media in my country all that closely, but my opinion is that these days, that's not a most important topic in Serbia. There are other more pressing topics in Serbia that relate to regional affairs, that relate to European future of Serbia, and so on, which are much more prominent right now from the superficial view that I've had the chance to take on the Serbian media. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there is no doubt that you are a brilliant and articulate young politicians who, beside everything, show us that you...
Thank you, and can you stop there? Sorry, I'm joking.
I will not, actually, because you showed quite a bitterness with this cancellation. Do you think, here again with my question, do you think that those cancellations actually were produced by your action, let's say with tweeting, starting with your tweeting war, somebody would say, and later on with the scandalous performance of the Marš na Drinu, Serbian military song that offended so many people and even found Secretary General surprised with everything? Thank you.
I don't know if my tweeting had any effect. I did tweet about this topic, if I remember well, in November of last year, when those acquittals were done by The Hague, when the appeals chamber of The Hague voted 3-2 to acquit the generals who were convicted in the first instance to big terms in prison. And it was after that tweeting that we started working and getting all these confirmations for all these people who would participate, and the confirmation of those one of the two states who ended up boycotting. They confirmed their participation after those tweeting, how do you call it, tweeting wars in November. But those were the...
Somebody would say,
yeah, well, I mean,
exchange everything with
exchange, right, exactly. That took place in November. Those confirmations came at a much later date. So I don't think that they influenced them.
People have a memory with that they didn't feel good with your tweets and with everything else.
Well, they confirmed participation much afterwards. So they may, if they had difficulty with those tweets in November, I can't really understand why would they then confirm their participation in the later months. They obviously didn't have problems to the extent that they wouldn't want to participate as a result of those tweets. So my answer to you is no, I don't think so. And I must say that you said scandalous and offensive playing of the song. I must admit, Errol, that you just now deeply offended me when you called a song that is next to sacred to an entire nation an offensive and a scandalous song. I've never discussed it in public. I had public announcements. I had them on my website. My point of view. I've never had a chance to say it in public, but I will use this opportunity to say it now. The First World War is one big part of Serbian history, and we feel very emotional about it because 1/3 of our male population died in that war defending the country against the aggression. 1/4 of a total population died. It was a 1/3 of male population. That song, written back in 1918, symbolizes our sacrifice for freedom in a war which we fought on the side of the Allies. That's a big part of our history. That's a big part of our culture. That's a big part of who we feel we are. And we shared it with the international audience. And I personally find it deeply offensive that you are branding those songs which are next to sacred, as I said, to my people in such a way. Please.
Sure, thank you. Just as a follow-up,
Thank you.
What about the...
Have you not offended me? Maybe I would have allowed a follow-up.
But I
Please.
would like even to offer
All right,
my explanation to that. This is personal.
Please, please.
Okay, all right.
In 1993, that song was used for raping women in Bosnia. You cannot put away that part
Thank you,
of
Earl.
this song.
That is an
Can you
outrageous
address
claim.
that?
That's an outrageous claim.
Okay,
And outrageous and untrue. Please.
all right, I wanted to thank you for these lengthy answers on the past event, and on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access, I want to ask you about a couple of the upcoming events, one being the Africa event. I've heard from a few of the African permanent representatives that there was some, I mean, again, I just want to say what I've heard from them, and maybe you can respond to it, that there was some feeling that maybe it should, the title at least, should have been something more about either business or renaissance. There was some concern that Africa, every time it comes up at the UN, is associated only with conflict. So I wanted to know, have you heard that? You know, just what do you make of it? Is there some way that the content can address that concern? And also, you know, you mentioned hotspots. There's at least three times redrafted Syria resolution that's making the rounds. And I wonder if you could give us some insight into, one, your office's involvement, if any, in the drafting of that, and when you think it may, you know, be launched in the General Assembly, and what you think of it. Thanks.
When it comes to the African debate, our actual subtitle of it is Nexus Between Development and Security. Peaceful resolution of conflict is the overarching theme of the 67th presidency. That's how I picked it. So the actual title about a peaceful resolution of conflicts in Africa, I picked the title so that it corresponds to the overall overarching theme of the presidency. But we are going to examine the nexus between development and security. And it's going to go much beyond discussing only physical conflicts. First of all, the conflicts and the peace and security are first and foremost the business of the Security Council. So we're not trying to take away competence from the Security Council, but it is obvious that there are conflicts in Africa, and in particular the three geographies we're going to focus on. One is Sahel, the other is Great Lakes, and the third one is the Horn of Africa. And we'd like to be much more developmental or development-oriented the way we are structuring the panels. Again, when it comes to the states, you can't really control, you can't really tell people what they are going to say. They're going to say what their national position is. But the one where we can have an influence, and that's in the panels. We're going to make a panels more development-oriented. But we'll continue working in the days to come with African member states, and it's going to be a joint enterprise, if you will, ending in a declaration, which I believe is going to be a good, strong, positive declaration commemorating and celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Organization of African Unity. And when it comes to hotspots, of course, Syria is one of those places of the world, an extremely sad part of the world, and possibly saddest. But the Office of the President of the General Assembly has not been involved yet in any of the drafting. I have scheduled some meetings in the days to come. As I said last week, I was away. I was in China and in Turkey, and I also had this big event on criminal justice, so I haven't had a chance to look at it. But in the next days, I'm going to take a look at it, and I'll be able to say more after I have these meetings. Madam?
Yes. Does not your African meeting duplicate what the Security Council just did on exactly that topic of conflict resolution? And then getting back to the Augean discussion here, was there any reason, and your president sort of mentioned it, that your meeting was held at around the time of the creation of the fascist state in Croatia, which was admittedly one of the cruelest in the world in World War II. Lots of people don't like the reversal of the indictment of it is very controversial, the Croatian generals, but the two tied together didn't seem to make much sense. And third of all, courts don't give reconciliation, which was the topic of it. They never do. They provide maybe a deterrence, maybe some relief for the victims, but reconciliation has to come through all the little bits and pieces of the former Yugoslavia. I don't know what you think of that.
Well, thank you for those questions. First of all, as I said earlier, we're not trying to duplicate the work of the Security Council. But the Security Council, in my opinion, deals with issues of peace and security, the hardcore peace and security stuff. What I'd like to achieve, what I hope to achieve in this thematic debate, is more to do with how development can help alleviate the problems or help resolve the hard stuff that is taking place and which is being dealt by the Security Council. So how does the sustainable development, how does the post-2015 agenda ties into the attempts, international community's attempts to solve the problems of Africa? Also look at the cultural aspects and the coexistence of various ethnicities and religions in Africa. It'll be more focused, if you will, on the soft aspects of the African problems than on the hard aspects of the African problems, which are, according to the Charter, are dealt by the Security Council. But this is in no way an effort, a duplication of efforts. And by the way, we're working with all the member states, including the permanent Security Council members, on organizing this thematic debate. When it comes to the issue of the date, yes, the date coincided with the anniversary of the creating of possibly the cruelest puppet state in the Second World War, that is the independent state of Croatia, a notorious fascist ally in the Second World War. But that date is a date, and that state is a state from which everybody distanced itself, including the modern Croatia. So I don't think that anybody should feel uncomfortable on that date, which symbolizes a state from which everybody distanced themselves. And I don't think that anybody should feel uncomfortable. Nobody rightfully feels uncomfortable on the Holocaust Remembrance Day. So why would anyone feel uncomfortable on the 10th of April, which is a symbol of another great evil, which I'm not trying to compare with the Holocaust, but manifestly a very evil symbolism. I wonder if everything else stayed same. Would those people who have difficulty with that date, would they have the difficulty if it coincided with, for example, Srebrenica massacre? So if everything else stayed the same, but you had a 10th of July instead of, sorry, 11th of July instead of the 10th of April, would all of a sudden everything be just okay? I don't think so. So I don't think that the date was the main issue at stake. That's my personal opinion. And when it comes to reconciliation, that's actually one of the big debates. That's one of the big issues that I believe were supposed to be discussed and ended up being discussed, whether or not international criminal justice has a role in reconciliation, and there are opposed points of view. Academically, there are opposed point of view. But if you go to the Hague Tribunal, I'm now referring to the Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, what are the goals of the tribunal? Go up on their website. Reconciliation is one of the main goals that they state as one of the main goals of their work. And academically, I am aware of a different points of view, including the one that you just spelled out.
Hi, Mr. President. Hi, Mr. President. Thank you, Hank Flynn, Press TV. And with respect to what you said about this Syria resolution, I did hear what you said about your busy schedule and your intention to brush up on it. I wondered academically if you know who drafted it and who its sponsors are, and if any information at all you might have about how it compares to the two rejected ones in the Security Council.
I must admit that I have only superficial information at the time being. If I were to say something, I'd be speculating now. I would really, I mean, in the next couple of days, I will focus on this in the next few days, and I'll be in a much better situation to answer. It's, of course, a very delicate issue, and I'd rather not give semi-answers, including on the content, which I overhear is, you know, there are differing points of view on the content of the resolution. But if they decide, if the member states decide to go ahead with this resolution in whichever shape or form they decide to go ahead with it, I will do my job as the President of the General Assembly.
Just, if I may follow,
Sure.
it was on the General Assembly website. I looked a day ago. Maybe it's up there now, but it wasn't listed amongst the drafts. I'm just wondering who wrote it.
I have no answer to this question now. Please.
Two questions. First of all, Syrian opposition.
Syrian opposition.
Yeah, they are trying to get the United Nations seat from the regime.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think if they apply for this? If they submitted this, what can happen?
It is obviously an enormously delicate issue. An issue that involves aspects of setting up precedents, and a lot of people I hear feel uncomfortable with it, not because of their views with respect to the Syrian crisis, but because of potential repercussions that, say, a precedent would create in their parts of the world. That's what I hear. I haven't had a chance to discuss this in detail, I must admit. But there are established procedures in the United Nations, and they have to do first and foremost with the Credential Committee of the United Nations that is comprised of a number of countries. Every year a number of them changes. Some are permanently there. But ultimately the decision as to who is given credential and who represents whom in the Organization of the United Nations is decided by the members of the Credentials Committee. That is my understanding of the situation, but I must admit that I haven't had a chance to follow very closely in the last week to 10 days where all this started being a big issue, but in the next few days I'll be much better educated and then prepared to answer. Are there any other questions? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I hope this conference clarified some aspects, especially with respect to the last week's debate. I hope that we're going to be able to read about issues discussed here in the newspapers. It hasn't always been the case in the past, but I'm sure that it was important and interesting enough for us to be able to read about what was said today. Now, there are, up there when you're leaving, there are copies. There are copies of a Srebrenica resolution of the Serbian Parliament, of correspondence between Mothers of Srebrenica and the Office of the President of the General Assembly. There is also a speech of mine that I gave at the opening because Madam who represented Mothers of Srebrenica said that she was offended by my speech. So I ask you, yes, she did. Yes, she did. Yes, she did. And no, yes, she did. She said she was offended by my speech. I watched the conference very carefully. You can watch it again. So I have my speech there. And also, there is a list of people who were invited together with dates when they confirmed, withdrawn, declined. And as I said, if you're interested in the details of this correspondence, send me an email, copy the person, and then if that person says yes, I'd be very happy to share it with you. Thank you.